I bought this dresser at an auction for $55. It also came with that mirror that you see there and a set of 2 matching nightstands. But I'm going to be using those for a different project. Because the chalk paint that I'm using is VOC and toxic free, and it's 100+ degrees outside, I'm going to be moving this indoors to paint. The first thing I always do is look at a piece and determine if I'm going to keep the hardware or not. This hardware is super outdated and I know I don't want to keep it, so we're just going to go ahead and take it off. And even when I don't keep the hardware, I keep the hardware screws, and I love putting them in these magnetic bowls that I got off of Amazon because I don't lose them, or as many of them. Now that all the hardware is removed and I'm looking at this blank, clean slate, I've determined I want to use knobs on this piece instead of pulls. This means I'm going to have to poke new holes, which I do love poking new holes. There's a hardware jig that I have linked below that most normal people would use, but I've decided that I'm going to eyeball it. I'm using the pre-existing holes and just going right in the middle. Piece of cake. As with any piece of furniture, no matter how you got it, how nice the people were, how clean the people were, if they had animals, if it was in their barn, if it was in their mansion, it does not matter. Always clean the piece. I'm using Dixie Belle's white lighting, which is a degreaser, deglosser, and it's going to cut through any furniture polish or kid grime, candle wax, or whatever else might possibly be on this piece. And now we have to fill in those holes that we don't want anymore. This is Dixie Belle mud in white. It also comes in brown and black, and if I'd had brown, I would have used that because the white is such a stark difference from the brown color of the dresser. When I paint over it, I'm going to have to give a couple of extra coats to cover up that white against that darker surface. I like this mud because it's a softer wood filler than, say, Bondo. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my Bondo and I use it on about 95% of my projects. But for this particular one, I felt like the softer wood filler would be better. And I can use my battery-powered rotary sander to sand it down. I can add more. It's water-based, so it's going to sink down into those holes. If I need to, I can add more to it. It dries pretty quickly. And then I can come back and hand sand that last little bit. Quick tip. The reason I say battery-powered rotary sander is because it has less torque and will be more gentle over this mud than an electric-powered rotary sander. Battery-powered has a whereas an electric has Post in the comments if you know where that's from. Just curious. I think I'm showing my age there. I'm using a 180 grit sandpaper here, so I'll give the entire dresser one good pass before I come and check to see if I need more mud. Stripping and sanding is my least favorite thing to do in furniture flipping, but I do love a wood top, and I'd say I do about 90% wood tops on all of my furniture because it's just so pretty. But the process literally stinks, and I should be wearing a mask and gloves right here. So please don't judge me too harshly because I do put that on later. Trust me when I say this stuff gets up in your nostrils and it's hard to get out. Plus it's super toxic and you should always wear a face mask. Do as I say, not as I do. So I've showed you my 2 least favorite things to do, but here is one of my absolute all-time favorite things to do. I like to go irritate my husband when he's trying to get work done. I just waltz on over with my cold glass of water while he's out there sweating and stand exactly where he needs to be. But I can't do that for very long because I do have work of my own to do. This has been sitting on here for about 40 minutes and I'm going to give it a test and see if it'll scrape off. I chose this scraper because it's the widest one that I had and I thought it would save me time and I'd just get wider paths done. But while it was taking off the finish, it was also gouging into the wood and I would have to come back and sand that smooth later. Now, patience is something that I am still working on, but absolutely lost out to during this project. In hindsight, I should have scraped at that a little bit more with a different scraper and then come in with my quadruple zero steel wool to scrape it back. It was totally working, but I needed a sponge about the size of a throw pillow to cut through this because I went through 3 sponges real quick. Hindsight, should have scraped it back a little bit more, Christy. So now that I have done the correct amount of scrubbing and sanding, I will come back in with my paint thinner, pour it on top, then scrub back with a quadruple zero steel wool as much as I possibly can, and then come in with a 180 grit sandpaper on my rotary sander. Good God, Alexa, what timing? Alexa, stop. I mean, I guess technically I'm the one that set the 3-minute timer, but who's pointing fingers? Here you will see the unnecessary gouges I made with that original scraper. I went with wider, not better. But honestly, it didn't take that long to scrub them out. They were not super deep. Thank goodness, because like I said, one of my 2 least favorite things to do. Now just imagine if this part weren't recorded in time lapse and you actually had to experience it in real time. Let me just tell you, like, you contemplate all of your life's choices because you have plenty of time to do that. But in the end, you have this beautiful wood grain that you're already thinking, what color am I going to stain it? And I don't know, it's so worth it in the end. It's kind of like labor. Not quite as bad as labor, but almost. So the 180 grit that I used to sand everything down to bare wood left the wood fibers still a little bit rough. So I'm taking a 220 and I'm coming back in and making this thing as smooth as I can't say that on here. I've given this an up close and personal inspection, and I've seen just a couple of areas where I need to refill a little bit more mud to make this super smooth. I don't want you to be able to tell that I refilled these holes. Using a lint-free cloth, I'm wiping back all of the dust that I've created by sanding all of this down. These are 2 completely different finishes. The mud is so much more porous than the finish of the dresser. So I'm going to seal it all in using this clear coat spray paint. That way, when I come back to paint over it, it's one cohesive finish. Of course, I decided to go with my fave blue, Bunker Hill blue, but it wasn't quite electric enough for me. So I went ahead and decided, let's go ahead and mix some pure ocean in with it and see what magic happens. So I grabbed one of my many little shot glasses. I won't explain why I have those sitting around. And I kind of liked what I had going on. I probably did 3/4 Bunker Hill with 1/4 pure ocean to make this electric blue. Now to choose just the right paintbrush for this job. I'm going with Paint Couture's Angled Mini. There are plenty of times when I paint a piece of furniture and I'm not sure if the shade of color that I used is the right one. I have to stand back and kind of think about it. But with this piece, this was the exact shade of blue that I had in my mind when I was mixing. So I was so pleased when I looked at it and I was like, yes, this is totally exactly what was in my head. Tip number 2. When you have gone to the trouble to custom mix a color, always make sure that you make enough of said color, keep it covered, and put it in your refrigerator, right next to the salsa. Here upon final inspection, I still see spots I've missed. So we're going to go in a 3rd and final time and cover these up. Yeah, that's right. Acid. Using a completely worn out sanding sponge. Like, this thing is probably in the 400s perhaps. It's just enough to sand a little bit off. I want this to be so smooth I don't have to come back a 4th time. And it's appearing like I might be successful this time. One more go with the spray sealer so it's all one cohesive finish. And then the final and so satisfying last coat of paint. I'm using Dixie Belle's No Pain Gel Stain in the color Golden Ash. It's just a really soft brown. Now, no paint gel stain is an oil-based stain, so I like to use a glove, of course, and a single sock to protect my skin. I just don't want that gel stain getting on there and like, you know, having to use mineral spirits to get it back off. So I try to protect myself. Now, I love this gel stain because I can apply it not only over bare wood and it goes on flawlessly, but I could put this over a pre-existing finish like factory finish or a primed surface, a painted surface. Now, I won't have that wood grain because I didn't sand down to bare wood, but it will give you a wood tone and do it without having to sand, which I think is amazing. But if you do get some on your skin, you can also use petroleum jelly as a healthier alternative to getting it off of your skin. One of my final steps is to spray this using a satin clear coat. This is my Harbor Freight sprayer. It was about the $100 range. And I just hook it up to my air compressor and then I give it a test spray, and that's not supposed to happen. And I'm not sure at this point why it's happening. So the first thing you need to do is unhook it. It's still coming out. I'm not even pressing anything. It's still coming out. So I'm confused at this moment because it's never happened before. But then I realized, let's make sure everything is tightened up. Most of the problems that you might have with your paint sprayer is due to airflow. So in this situation, it's because my nozzle wasn't on tight enough. So it's not creating that super tight seal that it needs in order to spray. Another problem I have sometimes, there's a little hole in the lid, and if that gets stopped up with paint or a clear coat, then I have to constantly open the lid up, and so I keep a needle in my garage so that I can poke that hole clear each time. And so if you're having problems like that with your air sprayer, you might troubleshoot it that way. Because I know the top of this piece is going to be getting a whole lot more use than the body, I'm going to be putting Minwax polyurethane on. It's an oil-based sealer. I like to use a single sock with a glove, of course, because like I said, it's oil-based. This is just the easiest way that I have found to apply this top coat. Now, if I do get some on my skin, no worries. I don't have to use paint thinner or something super abrasive to get it off. I just get petroleum jelly and rub where it got on my skin, and then oil activates oil, and you can wipe it right off with a paper towel. Look at that beautiful wood grain. When I first scrubbed and sanded all of this off, I wasn't sure that it was going to be worth it, but after staining it, I'm so glad I went with a wood grain top. It's so beautiful. After what seemed like months, but was really only about 24 hours, my hardware has arrived.
Are you excited too, Gentry?
Gentry's excited if Mommy's excited. And here we have the finished product. What do you think? I chose brass knobs because I felt like they complemented the electric blue and the soft brown of the wood grain, and it just made it all come together. I do a lot of neutral tones, and sometimes I like to just put a pop of color every once in a while in there, you know, just to keep my soul from dying. Wow, Christy, dramatic much? All you artists out there know exactly what I'm talking about, though, so I'm going to keep that in. You may have noticed that I brought this outside and didn't actually paint it indoors, and that was only because I decided to use citrus stripper on the top, and I didn't want to do that indoors. So that was wasted, but it's cool. It all worked out in the end. What do you think?